Happy spring. My name is Roya Rastegar. I am the director of programming for the LA Film Festival, and I'm really excited to be here with this exemplary panel. I fangirled out in the back room before. So before we start, I just want to get a sense of who we have here in the room. So how many actors here have written or directed their own work in the past? Wow. And how many people want to or are working on writing and directing something of their own? Great. Okay, that's the majority of the audience. Fantastic. So I don't want to rehash in this panel kind of how dismal things are for women working in film and television. I feel like we all kind of know the stats and we're good. I also don't really want to talk about how ridiculous representations of women are. The majority of films and series have been historically written and directed by white men. We know that. And this has actually shaped how we've learned to see and to understand women. And, that's ourselves, right? So it's actively shaped how we have understood ourselves. And so we have this amazing opportunity this evening with this kind of rock star panel to really think about how we create characters and stories that we actually want in our world. So our goal tonight is twofold. First, to highlight the strategies that these writers and directors have used to make their work. And second, to explore the creative process of developing and bringing to life female characters. So those are going to be our two goals. On the panel, just to introduce everybody briefly, this is Karyn Kusama.
Hi.
I have this just because I'm nervous and also because their resumes are so long. But Karyn's feature film debut, Girl Fight, premiered at Sundance at 2000. It was a drama that broke Michelle Rodriguez. It also formatively shaped my sexuality, so thank you for that. It won Cannes, the Grand Jury Prize, and the Directing Award at Sundance. She also directed Aeon Flux, which was an action sci-fi, and Jennifer's Body, which was a horror, and The Invitation, which premiered at South by Southwest last year, which was also a horror. And she's directed much television, Man in the High Castle, Masters of Sex, Billions, Chicago Fire, and it goes on. This is Karyn Kusama.
Hi.
So Zoe Lister-Jones started as an actress, and she was in several episodes of Law and Order, but also in a number of films that she wrote with Daryl Wine, who is her husband. I just wanted to confirm that before saying it live. And Daryl directed Breaking Upwards, which she also wrote, and you starred in that, and also the environmental drama Consumed, which premiered at LA Film Festival, which you also acted in.
Yeah, I wrote and produced that one too. With him, yeah.
Yes, you wrote it and produced it as well. And then her directorial debut, which is so awesome, and I hope you all get a chance to go see it. It just premiered to great acclaim at Sundance. It's called Band-Aid. It is hilarious and so smart, and she stars in it alongside Adam Pally and Fred Armisen. So this is Zoe Lister-Jones. So Tina Mabry, her feature film debut, Mississippi Damned, I remember when I saw it, I was totally blown away. It ended up winning the Grand Jury Prize at Urban World, and it won awards around the festival circuit. It would be way too long for me to even list, but it was also Philadelphia Film Festival, Chicago International Film Festivals. She is a director and writer on Dear White People, which is Netflix's new series, and also Queen Sugar, which is on OWN, and also Future States and Queen of the South. Queen of the South and Queen Sugar are different television series. And she's working on both of them, so. And then, yes, big. Meera Menon's work I first was introduced to when I saw her really, really smart coming of age about a young Iranian American woman during the time of Obama's election, right? John Kerry's election. Such a long time ago, in 2008, right? and it's called Farrah Goes Bang. And then her second feature is called Equity, and it premiered at Sundance. It was bought by Sony Picture Classics. And she's also directed many television series, including Snowfall and Blood Drive. And, you know, in between her two films, she edited for many years The Larry King Show, which is just like an extra little thing that she can just throw on the table as like a talent. It's like her hidden talent. So I'm going to start with some questions directed to each member, and then we're going to open it. I'm going to send questions out to the larger panel, and we're just going to have a discussion. And then at the end, we'll go to audience for questions. So the first question that I have is just, when did you realize that you were a storyteller? Was there a moment when you were just like, this is what I am supposed to be doing?
A panel full of women. It's so nice. We're all like,
I know.
You take the floor. No, you take the floor. There's no men being like, I have an answer.
Okay, I'll go first. Moments, probably, I mean, I played make-believe for way too long, as probably many people in this room did, like past the point of appropriate age. And I wanted to be an actor. I mean, I thought that's what I wanted to do when I was a teenager, and was on a really terribly embarrassing Indian soap opera called American Dreams that was shooting in my like family friend's like basement. First like satellite Indian cable TV show. It was totally like above board, but it made me realize that I was not a good actor, but it made me very interested in the whole kind of procedure and being in like kind of the person that set up the kind of circumstances for those things to happen, and I think that probably is when I thought I should do this, or I should try.
There we go again. We're very polite. I love it. So I guess everyone can take a lesson from women and learn how to have some home training. So for me, I mean, I was a little kid, and I mean, I grew up in Mississippi, so no one makes movies there. I think the last movie that was made was Mississippi Burning, and I think that was like, 1985. So I would just take my little McDonald Happy Meal toys and come up with little episodic intros. And and have little storylines, but writing didn't really seem like a possibility. So I went to law school. Well, I was gonna go to law school, and I saw Boys Don't Cry and Love and Basketball. And upon seeing two women who wrote and directed those films, I decided to scrap going to law school, and I went to film school instead, and it changed my life.
I started, my mom's a video artist, so I think I was exposed to storytelling and the visual medium of storytelling from a pretty young age. And I started creative writing. I was thinking about this question because you wrote us and said that I was kind of going to be the opener. Spoiler alert, we knew this was coming. So, and I was thinking about what that question, which I haven't really thought about, but I remembered that I wrote a short story when I was in like third grade that was so dark. It was about lesbian lovers who were writing to each other from heaven and hell, and they were both dead.
Do you have the rights right now?
I know. So Tina's optioning it. That was my first story, and it's Tina's next story. Yeah, but I also in college took a sketch comedy class and found that I loved writing comedy. And David Mamet, who was he ran my acting school, but he never was there. He founded my acting school, and when he would drop in, everyone would just freak out, and the teachers would all be like, "Everyone has to stop what they're doing and go see David Mamet." And you'd throw up a scene, and he'd come in and treat you like garbage, and you'd sit down and feel like really bad about yourself. And I put up a scene that I had written, which was scary, and he told my teacher that I should write a screenplay. So it was a really amazing encouragement from a person that I had iconized at that time in my life.
It's funny. I mean, I feel like I've always been attuned to reading, writing, storytelling, stories. But for me, I realized that the moment that I felt the need in myself was probably one of my first days, freshman year, when I was at film school. I went to the Tisch School at NYU. And we do this exercise where everybody talks about the movie that most changed their life and made them want to make movies. And I found that really difficult to answer. And I was more astonished by the fact that pretty much it was mostly boys in the class, but there were a few girls. But almost everybody said Star Wars. I want to say like 18 of 22 kids. And I realized then, if not me, when, because it just kind of felt like, okay, I get it. Star Wars was a formative experience, but really, do you all have the same formative experience? Surely that can't be true. And I just kind of felt like I needed to, for myself, figure out my formative experience and figure out if that's going to be an interesting place to spring from to make stories.
So do you remember when?
I may not have answered the question.
Okay.
And I might have said
Smart.
something like, I guess the only thing I can say for sure is it's not Star Wars. And I literally made no friends that day. I mean, I was like, oh, this is going to be lonely. But of course I found my people and all that happened. But it was very interesting to recognize that there was an absence of any interest in women's lives whatsoever. And I don't consider myself a crusader for that at all, ironically. But I was shocked that hadn't been interrogated that day. And that made me feel like I need to be a storyteller.
And that's why this panel is so awesome, because I think all of you have such really different starting points, and that's when the difference of your experience becomes really the value that you can mobilize to make really strong and unique work that stands out. So, easy question. And what was your first job? What were your first jobs in film? Do you remember?
I remember I worked as an intern for an independent film distribution company in New York called First Run Features. And I got to meet foreign filmmakers and political documentarians and just kind of the fringe of the fringe. And it was actually a really, at the time they were working with these animators called the Brothers Quay, and they were like famous recluses, so I got to meet them and go to Philly and drop off film to them, and I felt like this is a pretty cool job.
The first film that I made was with my husband, as you mentioned. It was called Breaking Upwards, and
Really good movie, by the way.
Thanks. And we made it for $15,000 and just got all of our friends together, and that was our first experience. It was really run and gun, but amazing, and all of our friends were in plays, and I was acting in a lot of plays at that time in New York, and so we shot it over the course of like many months, just depending, like basically every Monday that an actor had off, we'd be like, do you want to shoot another scene? And because we weren't paying anything, and so that was my first experience as a filmmaker, which was really cool and opened a lot of doors.
See, mine kind of came right at the end. I was at SC in grad school, and I was doing my thesis film, so that was going to be my calling card. You know how you always want to get it together. So I was working on that, but I was also co-writing a comedy, which is so odd for me. If you look at my work, I'm like the bleakest person ever on screen. And it was ironically called Itty Bitty Titty Committee. And so that was the first job I was ever hired to do coming out.
That movie.
That was a fun one.
My unpaid job would be I had an internship at Ted Hope's company when I was in college, which was really formative. Just be around people that had made such, the movies that made me think that movies were wonderful and different. And paid would be like a assistant did a lot of assistant to documentary filmmaking. I worked as an assistant to documentary filmmakers a lot in New York for like, archiving, scanning photos, just trying to make money. And then I worked as an editor for Larry King. I don't know if you guys heard that part. That was something I did for a very long time.
I just think that's so cool.
I'm glad you do.
Obviously, you're an unbelievable director, and you've made 2 features, but I don't know why editing is just like, whoa. So shout out to Elizabeth Subrin. She has a new film that's actually premiering this month called A Woman Apart. She has a blog also that's called Who Cares About Actresses? And I just wanted to read you a very small excerpt from there to kind of launch some more discussion. So she writes, actresses are women playing women. Actresses represent women. Actresses perform the gendered representation men create in mass-produced stories that penetrate society on every level. Though they are rarely responsible for creating or imagining these representations, actresses are enlisted to present to the world what a woman is. They are women written, directed, photographed, edited, marketed, distributed, and reviewed primarily by straight white men. So what I wanted to take the opportunity to ask, because all 4 of you are here, is do you think that women are represented differently by writers and directors who have experienced being female, or by writers and directors who are female, and how so? And I also don't want to separate gender from race here in this conversation, so I think you can also ask a similar kind of question there. So do you think that women are represented differently by writers, directors who are women or who have experience being female?
I would say yes. As an actress also, I experienced that a lot. I think that's a really interesting quote. And I think that a lot of responsibility falls on an actress's shoulders to subvert a lot of the writing that we're given, and a lot of the characterizations, and I think also to really I find myself hyper aware of even just like microaggressions towards women in writing, which I think is a hard thing to do, because as an actress you want to keep working, and if that's the majority of material you're being given, you don't want to always be kind of fighting that fight. But I think that in order to take ownership of a character and to feel that your character is imbued with integrity, you do always have to be fighting for that character to ultimately kind of sometimes be working against the writing itself. And as a writer, I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write and primarily write for myself, was to create characters that could subvert a lot of those kind of misogynist tropes that we see so often in film and TV, and to create more complex. I think when women write women, you see female characters that are much more complex, and when you see men writing women, you see a lot of female characters that are either underdeveloped or hateful, frankly. And I think hateful is a strong word, and it can be kind of, it can take on a lot of different forms. But I think, having worked in television a lot, you're often playing a nagging wife, and that, I think, in a way that is funny, right? That you're always the kind of dry, barb-giving, eye-rolling wife to a husband's hijinks. And I think that it's so refreshing to be on this panel and to see how many women are now writing characters that are harnessing the action themselves rather than reacting to it.
I would say I've never read a script written by a woman where there's a female character described as, she would be beautiful if she just took her glasses off, or and I cannot tell you how many times I've actually read something along those lines where it's like, soon she will turn into the Cinderella she's meant to be. And it's just like, what fantasy world are we living in that women have to constantly be sort of like a secret princess? It's actually not how women, but I mean, it's not how I don't see myself that way. I doubt many of you see yourself that way. So it's a very weird thing to see over and over again as a innocuous descriptor.
I mean, I would say, just like kind of what comes to mind to me is like, I don't think there was some intangible experience I had seeing Mississippi Masala by Meera Nair for the first time that like I later in my adult years quantified and was able to understand as seeing myself authentically on screen for the first time. And that leap made me understand the imperative of, kind of putting people behind the camera that could authentically represent diverse experiences. And I'd never thought about it any differently until I saw it, and what I saw was a secret princess. No.
Well, I try to avoid the secret princess as much as I can when I'm writing. But, the one thing I kind of feel like, yes, is definitely obviously the answer. That you often see characters just completely flat. They have no backstory. And like you said, they're just they react to everything. They never push the story. So I think, and to me, that's lazy writing. And I think that is something that if you call yourself a writer, you need to look at every character that you have to make sure that they're well-rounded and that they're actually human and crafted. So to me, whether that be male or female, you need to do a better job at what you do at your craft. And as far as kind of bringing in, as far as definitely with women, I can speak from the directorial side. It is very hard to direct action. And thankfully, I have a showrunner now in Queen of the South who fought as much as she could to make sure she had as many female directors on an action show. But the question was always, can they direct action? And I was like, does it come from testicles or something? I'm not quite sure, like, if action is coming from something different that I'm unaware of. Like we're filmmakers, right? So, but you hear those asinine answers. And it's okay. And I think you even see it, at least it's changing now, but I can speak back to about 9 years ago, dealing with Mississippi Damned, as far as when it came to race, distributors said, Precious was out, we're coming out. We cannot have 2 black films in the market. It just can't bear it. So I'm like, okay, apparently the world is going to explode because we have 2 black dramas, but we have 20 white comedies. But that's okay. And so when you hear that, and then there's not even a flinch with saying it, and they're not even aware of like how, antiquated that is and how offensive it is. I think you just kind of really have to really strengthen yourself as much as you can and to make sure that you put out work that speaks for you, speaks for us.
I think for me, like with seeing Indians on TV, like I never until Mindy or Aziz, those shows, saw narratives with Indians on TV where like the central point of conflict, the thing they needed to overcome was their Indianness, was this kind of cultural conflict. And I think women experience the same thing in roles often as well, that gender or race like kind of serves as the primary obstacle, because in theory that's all white men think we struggle with, or whatever it is,
Well, here's another question that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this panel, and based on all the women's studies classes that I'm sure many people have taken. So gender, is a construct. If we understand as a construct, how do you go about then actually constructing a female character? Like, what is your process? Do you base it on somebody that you know? Do you think about it? Do you consciously think about the character as being female? I know it's a little bit of a heady question, but I'm just wondering if you, like, how you go about doing it, or if you don't even think about it. You're just like, this is just a person that I'm basing on myself or other people that I know.
It's funny. When I was writing Girl Fight, people would say to me, they would ask me about what I wanted out of the movie and what I wanted people to feel when they were watching Diana Guzman, played by Michelle Rodriguez eventually. And I, I said, you know, like, I want people to feel looking at her and looking at her cornrows and looking at her beautiful femaleness, I want them to feel the same kind of almost electric charge that we felt when we saw Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire. Like, I want the sense of mythic existence to be really paramount. Like, that's the most important thing, is the sense that we're watching a character enter their body and live in their body. And that was so often, I think, in the American film tradition, that's something that men get to occupy. This being aligned with their physical self. And I feel like that's something we as women kind of have to confront on a daily level, that we live in our body and somehow our body is both other people's weapons and other people's objects. And I wanted that character to own that. And I don't think that answers your question.
Oh no, that's so deep. It totally does.
But
the most amazing one. Like, I'm going to be thinking about that for so long. But I think you really accomplished that with that character. I mean, that's why I jokingly say it was formative to my sexuality, but it really was. Like, as a young woman, I was just coming out at that time, and I felt that from her, from that character. Like, that mythicness that you were talking about, I felt it emanating from that character, and I had never seen that before, ever.
Well, I think it's really interesting when you watch characters that you feel are genuinely powerful, whether they know it or not. And I wanted to I feel like we watch and I love these movies. I love watching Travis Bickle and Taxi Driver, and that's very important to me. But I also need to see women occupy that space. And it doesn't have to be the same kind of power that men occupy, but I need to see them find that power, because that's part of basic, essential narrative.
And I guess what's so cool listening to what you're saying is part of what writer-directors who are female or who have experience being female, when they're writing, you're almost exploring what is that power, because it's not just the female version of the male power or something. It's something totally different. So it's like, yeah, sorry. My mind is a little blown.
To finish, I would just say I'm realizing as I get older and really sort of embrace being female and embrace that status, I guess I would say, I'm really seeing that the strength for me comes in vulnerability. The strength comes in being able to say I am alive to the fact that I am fragile, that I could get hit by a bus when I walk out this door, and that we all could, and that to live on that edge is actually living on a really frightening edge. And I feel very confident that this is the way I understand my strength, is through my human vulnerability, as opposed to something more, I want to say, typically defined as masculine.
That's an interesting, I mean, I'm pivoting, but that's an interesting kind of line that I think women directors have to toe, which is that I think to express vulnerability is something that I think we're all like, oh no, we can't do that, because then they think we couldn't direct an action film, or they think we couldn't control an entire crew, or they think we couldn't, as an actor, harness the action, right? Like, and I think it is interesting as a woman to kind of think about how we inhabit those roles ourselves, and the roles that we feel people expect of us in a male-dominated industry. And I don't have an answer for that, but I just think it's interesting. I like that's something you're embracing now.
I'm trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the answer to it is that we just keep creating work. That's one of the things. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work on 2 shows where it's female leads, but we take just as much care with our male characters. We take a chance to make sure, how well-rounded is he? What's he struggling with? What is his vulnerability? So it's, I just think that I wanted to see on TV. I wanted to see on the screen something that looked like me. And that was the thing that was missing to me every time. I loved movies, I would go, but I never saw myself. And it makes you feel kind of lonely, or you see a misrepresentation of yourself, which is even worse. And you're like told by an outsider, I can tell. You do not know. You have never touched the South a day in your life. You know, so don't even go there. But, you know, it's something that to me is like, give a voice. And if you're waiting for someone else to give the voice, I think you're going to be waiting a long time. Do it yourself. And so that's one of the things I think that all of us have decided to do, is that instead of waiting for someone to come in and be that savior, let us do that with our own stuff.
Do you think about race as well as like another axis of identity? I mean, this word intersectional is, you know, something that's all over the place right now. And there's some problems I have with the way that people use intersectional, but I think when we're talking about the constructing characters, I actually think intersectional is a really great word, because you do have to think about, you know, just these different axes of identities that characters have. In Girl Fight, for example, the lead is Latina. How do you think about race in relationship to gender, sexuality, and class when you're working on characters? And what are some challenges that you faced, or what are some strategies that you've used to kind of represent or create characters that are kind of outside of your own personal identifications?
I mean, for me, I research. And usually you'll always feel a part of me in my work. So it's always going to be there. And anything I don't know, I'm going to research the hell out of it. Now I'm researching cocaine. So
How's that going?
it is inactive research. Yes. I'll just refer to what's online. I'm sure the NSA is coming after me soon. But just taking that time, but it's kind of talking about with race. I mean, I think that that's an issue sometimes that gets definitely overlooked. And you see characters sometimes that come in, that's the magical Negro that comes into it. Or here's the white male savior that's going to save the day. And, and I'm like, no, people are capable of saving themselves. And I think that can apply to females as well on screen. And so that's one of the things that I've found like has been like an obstacle, and that really pisses me off, honestly. And that I try to change, and I want to make sure that we have that we are very multifaceted. And whether that be with your sexual orientation, which I think is very important too, that's something that's being explored. And that, we see that on TV shows now, that I think it's becoming very much opening up a dialogue. And I think that's the whole point of films. You don't want to watch a film and then 5 minutes later forget what you saw. Like, we want to create discussion. And if we're doing that, then we're doing our jobs. But we just can't let, as far as like the obstacles of race, gender, sexual orientation, get in the way of that. And it's going to be a hard road. It's a hard road to climb anyway. Even I think if you're a straight white male, this industry is hard. But I do, and I'm not gonna lie, I do feel like we have it harder. I just don't, I think I think people may be a little bit too polite if they say, no, it's just the same. And I honestly, no, I don't feel that in previous meetings I've had a long time ago. And I don't hear that when I talk to other female directors. And so I don't think it's anything for us to hide. And I think if being more vocal about it and saying that, no, there's a problem with the 4% number, these are the things that start to change and start a dialogue with it.
I feel like I encounter a bit of difficulty when I read in a script a brown character or a woman. I think I put a lot more on that character, because like because as a director, I think you're trying to just create pipelines of empathy to every single character, right? That you're like trying to wrap your mind around, and maybe because like most stories I've been fed in my life have been situated from the white male perspective, because I grew up in this country as a brown kid and like surrounded by like white perspective, like kind of channeling empathy, trying to understand those characters doesn't feel as loaded as when I see a brown kid on the, in the script, or a woman, a woman kind of inhabiting a certain amount of power that I feel like is like I've never seen before. I start to feel very precious and like this character needs to represent everything that I've never seen, and that's a lot to put on a character. And so I have to constantly fight, I think, that instinct to make statements out of characters.
Let's talk a little bit about what your process is working with actors. So what is your approach to working with actors? And then can you maybe share a story of something that you maybe did right or something that you did very wrong while working with actors? And I mean, Zoe, for you, you've directed now yourself. And how was that experience versus working on 2 previous films where you were the writer and producer, but not, and the actor, but not the director?
I really enjoyed directing myself. I was great to work with. Yeah.
I suppose that means that you would work with yourself as the director again.
I would work with myself again and again. No, I think I think that actors have a really interesting perspective when they become directors, because I think that we having been on the other side of it, receiving direction, have seen what works and what doesn't. And I think that in some ways, is an experience that is, really learned so specifically just from, living it. And so, and also I think kind of being in the belly of the beast, like to direct other actors while being in the scene with them is a very interesting and complex experience, but for me, one that I found really fulfilling, not only because I like to control my other actors when I'm in scenes with them, but because I think you're not at a monitor. You're like living. You're looking in that person's eyes, and you're seeing if they're telling you the truth, and you're seeing if they're living in the moment with you, and you're seeing if you guys are going on a journey and because I wrote it too, that fulfilled my vision on all levels. So it kind of cut out that just time, like in terms of time, I could just go right from being in the scene, which is a strange experience, especially in like sex scenes where you're just like, okay, and now I'm going to give you direction and I'm fully naked. But like to be in a scene and just go right into like, let's do it right away, because I as an actor like that. I like to keep the momentum going, and say just like, let's just shift that, or let's just go right into it, no notes, and just see if we can get even deeper, But I would say as the things, and I'm sure that I did this myself, the no for me as a director is to tell someone what not to do. I think like always just giving action and active directions. And I think also, directions that can be specific and simple, but also directions that sometimes can be like a little bit elusive, that make an actor think and not necessarily know what you mean, but it just makes them like do something, because they're like, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna try something different and see if that's what you mean. And oftentimes that, I think, does trick an actor to get out of their own way.
You want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, to that point, I think it's really useful, if this works for your style, to just ask a lot of questions, because I think I'm very kind of aware of the incredible thing that actors are doing in front of me, and that they're present, or if they're not, that's the goal. They're trying to get there. And so for me, it's really important to try and figure out just how to facilitate that. And sometimes it means asking some questions. Sometimes it's a larger question. Sometimes it's something very specific. But I think that that can be helpful in recognizing that, like, I'm actually sort of here in service. That's part of the problem, I think, with the director paradigm, is the idea that the director somehow is in charge, when in fact there's so many people in charge at the same time.
Like, what kinds of questions would you ask?
I mean, it's a lot of speculative questions, because sometimes I'm watching a performance and something will hit me about the fact that we've never talked about a narrative thread that actually might live very deeply in this scene. You know, sort of, maybe it's never come up in the body of the work that a person is motherless, but then it's something that in some tiny way, even just in an action, even in a domestic moment, might have tremendous weight as a detail. And I just sometimes will speak aloud. And I don't mean for it to be derailing or confusing. I actually just want to ask the question. I don't know if there's ever a right or wrong answer. It's more just to sort of start the dialogue about, like, what is the reality that we're working toward?
Yeah, I mean, I think acting is such a vulnerable position. And I think coming from, I think we're all writers, you know, we're just actors with pens. We're in that position. And I think one of the things is I always want to make sure my actors feel safe. That's the first and foremost, that you're always going to know that you have an advocate, and I'm looking at you on every take. Between every take, I'm running up to you, whether it's a good job, whether not, but you're going to see me. I'm not just going to hang in village. And I see a lot of directors who are actually scared to talk to actors. And I'm like, stop looking at the camera right now. You need to talk to them, but they're afraid, they don't know what to say. And I had one actress said, she's like, you know, one director actually told me, act red. And she was like, what is, that's like, it goes back to, like, what is red? Like, wait, that is not a direction. And she's like, I just try to make up red, whatever that may be. She said, we went on to the next scene, so I guess I got it. But I mean, you know, but to really understand and to know when an actor's struggling, and you can see that and call it out right away. And then that's just having that conversation, pulling aside, seeing what's wrong. I mean, because sometimes it's just a quick little thing of not really understanding this one line in the entire scene. That line stands out. I don't understand the intention behind it. But you have to make sure you're the BS detector. That's what you are as a director. And not being afraid to go up, and you're working with your actors. You know, they're not puppets. And I see some people have actually physically moved an actor one place to another. And I'm like, they're not, you can ask them to take a step to the left. That might be an easier way to do it. But I think it's about taking the time, building a trust. Because once you lose the trust of an actor, they start directing themselves. You guys know this. And then that's it. You're done. And all you can do is just point the camera and hope that they give you what's going on, but they're not going to listen to you. But I think it's important to respect that. And that's one good thing I think about USC grad school, the film school. They make you take an acting class. And it's the most, and it scared the hell out of me. And I'm behind the camera for a reason. And so I think, you know, but being up there and seeing everybody on you and you're I mean, I was just shaking. Like, I had never been that scared in my life, but it made me have an appreciation for what's going on the other side of the camera with them. Imagine everybody staring at you, and then everyone's looking at a clock. And it's like, are we going to get this scene? Okay, you're going to get naked yet? Come on. Like, you know, but, you know, I think as far as like one of the issues that maybe we had a problem with an actor on set, and I was on Dear White People, and one of our guest actresses, she was like,
Names. I'm just kidding. Don't do
Name
it.
names.
Don't do it. It's live streaming.
You'll never know in her performance, so hey. But she said, I'm having trouble with these lines. It was a big, long line, and if you are ever been in any kind of Black Greek life, you know that's like Alpha Kappa Alpha, sorority incorporated. And she had to do this for this fake sorority, and there was this very long paragraph, and she had to read, and she was like, I've just been struggling with it. I'm just scared. I know I'm gonna mess up as soon as I get up there. And then she got up there and, you know, she got in her head. And I was like, just calm down, it's okay. Take two, she's still in her head. I went and got the iPad from the show creator. I sat right next to her and I sat in front. I'm like, I know what I need, and I knew what I needed to cut, but I had it, let it read. And I let her read right there. We did a teleprompter style. And taking that time. And then I knew I had her again the next day. And so afterwards, I went to her and I hugged her and I just kind of held her and I said, everybody has a rough day. Do not let this. You got cast in this part for a reason. Do your job. So that she would have the confidence to come back the next day and to do what she needed to do. And she did it.
I want to go be an actress just so I can work with Tina. Meera, do you have any thoughts on this?
I would never do that. I would tell her to get on book, off book, off book. What is the phrase? I don't know. I'm not an actor.
Make your actors feel like they're in danger. I think that's
Yeah,
a better.
yeah.
That's
Smack
actually
them around a bit.
direction.
But I think, I mean, that's the whole process is wired to make you get in your head as an actor, right? Like the time pressure and everything feeling like this is the only moment you have to get it right. And I do feel like as a director, your job is to diffuse how scary that is and tell everyone else around you that we're gonna take the time to get this right. We're just making movies. We're not solving not brain surgery or whatever is harder. I don't know.
You don't know.
I do wonder if brain surgeons are ever like, it's not like we're making movies here. You guys just need to relax. We're not making movies. So what advice would you give to emerging actors from a director's perspective?
Me? Oh. Like in the audition process or
Well, I'll make the question a little bit bigger. What advice, since so many people in this room are actually aspiring writers and directors, what advice would you give to actors and or actors who are aspiring writers and directors?
yeah, I mean, I think just write your own stories and find something that you need to say, because writing is tough, and it's got to be like essential for you to get it out. And if it feels overwhelming, find a partner who might inspire you and that you could team up with and write a story, or if you're a writer and not a director, find a director that you want to team up with. And I come from grassroots indie filmmaking, so in this day and age, really you don't need much to make a movie or a web series or whatever you want to start out by making. And as an actor, I would say, write a killer part for yourself. Then you don't have to audition, and auditioning is the worst. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll be inspired by one of your answers and piggyback on it. But you have something better?
I don't know if I have something better. You put me on the spot, man. No. I mean, it's. I think there's one thing I kind of put as myself as a writer-director. I'm a hyphenate, but I know when to take off my hats. And I think if you're writing, you're a writer at that moment. Don't look at it from an acting perspective. And when you get ready to do the acting part, put the acting hat back on. And the advantage you have is the story better than anybody else. That's the good thing you have. And we actually have on our show, which is so rare, an actor-writer. And he has had such a hard time. And he's like, you don't understand how much people don't see me as a writer. They just say you're an actor, and they push me aside, and they don't understand I'm really truly a hyphenate, and this is what I can do both. And so I see that struggle within him, and I'm really thankful now he is cast and actually acting in our season and writing on our season this year. So it is very possible to do that, and he auditioned for that role. And so my thing is, I think that write parts that you think that, you can excel in, but also discover whether or not, are you an actor-writer? Are you an actor-writer-director? Are you an actor-director? Which one? Just find out who you are and then go from there. And I think that by following people like her, I mean, I'm like trying to figure out like, oh, really? Let me know. I'm going to ask her some questions when this is done. just because you need to know. And I think that's the thing. We have to talk to one another. We have to learn what each other's experiences are. So look at my screw ups and don't do them. Like, learn from that. And I think you'll find that people are a lot more open to talk about those experiences, because I have no idea how you direct and act at the same time. I'm like completely in awe that I don't, there's no way I could do that. And so, so for you guys that are doing that, I really take my hat off to you. And I really encourage you to continue to do that and just continue to make sure that you study your craft and that you don't give up. That's one of the major things in this industry, because we all are so used to no's, and I hate auditions. I hate auditioning people. I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. I'm like, I feel so bad because I've got to tell someone no. I got to tell a lot of people no. And so it's not about those no's, it's about the one yes. And you're going to get that one yes, but sometimes you can give yourself the yes. And that's what you've done.
Do you find that financiers or producers are more attracted to certain kinds of stories?
Absolutely.
From you? And what kinds of, I mean, do you think that they expect you as a female director, and I really, really dislike the term female director. I was just telling Zoe that I was at a party for female directors, and somebody came up and someone came up and actually introduced himself to me as a female director, which I just thought was so, you have to just be so in your head and thinking about yourself constantly as a female director to actually introduce yourself in that way. Yeah, so sorry, that was like a little tangent. It's been upsetting me for so long. Thanks for letting me share it. I just felt so bad for that person, but I was just like, please don't, you're just a director. So my question is just, do you find that there's an expectation that you make a certain kind of story, or do you find that financiers get more excited by a certain kind of story because it's coming from you versus stories that you yourself would want to make that maybe you're not getting?
I mean, I definitely, because I've made now a couple of horror films or psychological thrillers or whatever one wants to call them, I feel like now the assumption is that's just what I do. And I've never seen myself that way. I've always imagined making all kinds of films, though that being said, I am very interested by the possibilities in genre. Like, I'm interested by super compact action films. I'm interested by crime thrillers. I'm interested by I'm interested by the possibilities in sci-fi. So I do think that gives me, I've felt it's been actually really good for me to see what's out there and to see that there is a lot of opportunity in that for me. But I definitely think people find genre generally easier because they just know how to sell it, or they know how to market it to some degree. And though I am a quote female director, I'm shocked and astonished by how frequently I get scripts that as just a sort of visual trope, oftentimes not even a fully fleshed out storyline. There's a woman chained to a wall. I'm fascinated that anybody thinks I want to direct that, but it's an interesting kind of blindness to the worst instincts of a lot of genres, which is just that women are bodies to be mutilated and thrown away. So it's very interesting to kind of see what's out there, and it's kind of eye-opening, but also to recognize how little of it speaks to me and how much I'd like to be speaking back using genre that big audiences want to see.
Yeah, I mean, horror, thriller. I mean, I do think there's a hunger, appetite, and money a little bit for that kind of genre work, but it's also an exciting space. Like Jennifer's Body and Get Out. I mean, like that's an exciting space with which to engage with representation. So I think that's great. But that is typically what I've found as well, is that there's an excitement for those more so than tiny independent comedies that you never sell, like my first film.
Yeah. Independent comedies are tough. This is not specifically an answer to your question, but I did want to mention it that the financiers of Band-Aid, the film I just made, are for white men, but I came into the room and told them that I would only make the movie if I could hire an all-female crew, and they were like, yes, and we're totally down with that, and they weren't allowed to come to set. And I that's not really an answer to your question, but
Really?
I
The whole crew was female for your
Yeah.
film? And those producers were not allowed to come to set?
yeah. And my husband stopped by just once for a couple hours, but then he
Conjugal
was kicked
visit,
off.
or-
Yeah, it was a conjugal
Hissing
visit.
the
Everyone was just screaming, "Man on the land!" Yeah, no, but it was, and I love being on this panel, and I love women in community. I just think, and I give a shout out to these financiers and executive producers who said like immediately yes, and that excites us. That excites us because it's like pushing boundaries and it's subverting something that, whether or not that is, I think studios are now feeling a little more pressure because the conversation is growing around the underrepresentation of female directors and crew members, but they're not
and
feeling
actors.
and actors. But I think it's not quite enough pressure, and I think especially on crews, it's pretty bleak in terms of women on crews. So yeah. Anyway.
That's really awesome about your financiers, because I think that the majority of films that I see, like maybe several hundred films a year I have for the last 10 years. It's just like what a festival programmer does. And so I see how very unoriginal so many of the films that we get are. I mean, maybe you wouldn't be surprised by how many films we get with the woman chained to the wall or killed, or it's just like,
The movies get made.
yeah, they actually get made, and I'm just like, why have these people wasted their time and energy on this film? Like if you're working so hard to make a film, why this one? It's literally what I think about like 90% of the time. But the other thing that I find really interesting is now I'm realizing it is one very kind of on trend to have films that are about people of color, and also very on trend to have films that are like focused on the lives of women. But what's so interesting is that so many of these films still are being directed by white men. And like in the director's statement, there's always this, I didn't set out to make a feminist film. It's like that kind of thing. And I've been thinking a lot about like, we're in a different like era right now politically, and everything feels more heightened. I've been thinking a lot about how in the film industry we can kind of create change in a really effective way, because the stats have been there for many, many years, and even organizations like Film Independent have been doing this work around diversity in film for 20 years, and yet still it's not that much progress that we've been making. And so I've been really thinking about like how does that progress get made, and it's so cool, this story that you say about your financiers. I think that that's like really an example of true allies, like white guys who have the money, who are like, we're gonna give you the opportunity to do this. And I often wonder why it is that white men don't recognize that when they're telling women's stories and like taking them money and doing all that, how they don't realize that at least even having a co-director who is female, like bringing up a woman with them, or giving the project to a woman to direct, and just like really thinking about being an ally in that respect. Or similarly with white people and people of color, white people who tell or who are directing and writing films about people of color. I feel like it's just so important to include people of color in that process, even to the very highest levels of authorship, like into the actual writing, like giving a writing credit, giving a directorial credit to those people. And so I think it's awesome that your financiers did that, and that's such a rare and awesome thing, and you can feel it in the film. You really, like, they did the right thing because that film is so fun, you can feel it.
Also, I think what you're bringing up, this really interesting point, which is about the fact that sort of women, we clearly can't just do it on our own. I mean, I want to believe that we could do it on our own, but if that were the case, I think we'd all be doing it. So we do need each other. We need the support and resources that everyone brings to bear. And I felt extremely lucky on the invitation to be working with producers who were a lot of like young, mostly white guys, but who just weren't troubled by my presence, and that was really interesting because it was like, oh, maybe this is part of a sort of thread of change that I just hadn't been exposed to yet, and it was very encouraging and interesting to see. And I would say conversely, it's as interesting and somewhat discouraging when you meet women in very high positions of power at the studio or in producing capacities who clearly carry a tremendous amount of unconscious bias with them and would never consider hiring a woman, just simply wouldn't, though they seem to sort of enjoy meeting you and sitting with you and talking about each other's kids and your vacations. The work gets eclipsed by this sort of blind spot. And I do think it's really important. I mean, what I find instructive about it is like, where are my blind spots? Where am I like meeting a really amazing female DP and an amazing male DP, and where am I just naturally choosing the male DP? I have to ask myself that question now. I have to ask myself the question of like every character. Why is this character female? Why is this character male? Why is this character black, white, Asian? I feel like that's now something it's worth it to look at without shame, because we all kind of we all bring our weird stuff to the table. But I do think there are people out there who are more expansive in their thinking, and it's a really important time to both find them, work with them, and encourage them if they encourage you, because it's so much about that.
Yes, applause.
Do you find that? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because, after you do like a festival film, often you'll do like a water bottle circuit and just meet like tons of meetings with, studios, production companies, and it's been interesting after this film to kind of see what it means to be a woman, a female director now, and kind of what Karyn is saying is like, how real does this possibility feel in these rooms? Like, are these kind of more perfunctory meetings, or are these people really willing to take that risk? Because so often you'll see male directors come out of Sundance or South by Southwest or LA Film Fest with a debut feature, and we saw they go off and make Star Wars or Jurassic Park, or there are huge risks taken, and I think, to Tina's point earlier, like those risks are really not taken on women. And what was interesting about hiring an all-female crew was that even women were really scared to hire other women. And these are not women in power. They're not studio heads. I mean, these are DPs or key grips. But it was a matter of experience, and that's always the question, and it comes up in the rooms in studios too, is we would hire more women if they had the experience necessary. And when I was talking to my department heads too, where they'd say, well, I've been working with this guy, he's my first AC, I've worked with him for 10 years, that's who I want to bring on. And I would say, I'm so sorry, but you can't bring him on, you have to find a female first AC. And I think part of that was that those women might not have the experience that makes you feel most comfortable, but how else are they going to get it? There's no opportunities. So I do think it's on us to also, face our own biases, like Karyn was saying.
Yeah, because I've had people, they would say like, oh, we need a list of female directors. Where do we find them? And I'm like, are you kidding me?
The dark end of the street.
Apparently, girl, we hide in alleys, I guess. I don't know. And it was, someone asked me like, oh, is there a Korean American or Korean female filmmaker that that could direct an episode? And I was like, yeah, like 3. What are you talking about? It's so many people. And I think that's why it's so important. And I do give Ava the props on that, and I do give Jessica Jones the props on that. I give you the fucking props on that, of actually having and being able to stand up and say, no, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to say we're going to have all female directors. Because the thing is, we know we're there. It's just you haven't opened the door.
Here's a question from Foster Wilson, which is Foster in the audience? Okay, so but this question is exactly to this point of if you want to hire an all-female crew, are there actually legal issues that you have to consider? I've dealt with a few individuals who felt challenged by this idea and claimed that it was unlawful hiring practice. Is it?
I mean, I don't know. Talk to my lawyer.
Wouldn't that be amazing if somebody tried to sue you for that?
You know, I did have someone say, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think it kind of calls into question, you know, when you look at even something like Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, it's like people who are oppressed require special attention until their oppression ceases. And I think the idea of like the fact that we could, like, if there have been boys' clubs for centuries, it's okay to create a women's club in order to subvert that boys' club that is impenetrable otherwise. I can't speak to it from a legal perspective, but I can get on a soapbox.
Well, here's a question. We've gotten 2 questions very similar. One from somebody who is unnamed, who says, how do you approach a situation at work when a man is patronizing or condescending, but you may damage your working relationships or the project if you address it? And then another question from Erica Quintana, there she is, which is similar, which is how do you approach asserting your authority in a professional atmosphere? Do you feel like the stereotypical you are bossy or BITCH word is still in play?
I mean, I think sometimes that people from the outside can easily say that, just having a woman in power, and if any kind of resistance at all to something, then yeah, you get labeled the B word. But for me, I mean, I'm not trying to be a dictator on set. It's taking all of us collaborative. You know, it's a collaborative effort. We're working together. But when I have had a trouble with a man who wanted to kind of thrust and want to have that, we have a corner discussion. And I can tell you right now, the last corner discussion I had earned a DGA award.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not trying to, run, dictate, but we're gonna have a conversation about it. Trust, it's not gonna go unwarranted. And after that, I'm like, we're still cool. Like, here, yep, let's go make this film. It's nothing about that, but I'm not going to be run over completely because you, as a man, think you know more than I do, or that you want to boss or you want to run this. And I'm like, nah, dude, and you're yelling. So just stop.
I mean, I'll speak as an actress, which is a place of much less power, and I think a place where you run into uncomfortable situations a lot because you are ultimately, even, if you're working with the wrong director, someone's puppet. And as women, that can get into pretty murky territory, especially over, sexualization and objectification and all of that stuff. And I think it is a tough place to be, because I do think if this is your livelihood, those conversations are, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable taking a director into the corner or a showrunner into the corner, I would feel comfortable having Tina do that for me. And now I know who I'm gonna call. But I think that it's a tricky, like, I don't have an answer for that, and I think, like, I took kind of an easy route, even though it wasn't easy hiring an all-female crew, because I actually wanted to avoid that dynamic at all costs, because I had seen it too many times. I had seen it in the most micro ways to the most macro, but I didn't want any women to be interrupted. I didn't want them to be condescended to. I didn't want them to be spoken over. And I felt that the only way to do that was to just eradicate all possibilities of that ever happening. But I think I went to this WGA panel of women television writers, and it was really intense. And I don't mean to like bring this down, but this one female showrunner said, when a similar question was asked, until you're running your own show, you don't say anything. And I was like, oh, that's so raw and that's so real. And as a staff writer, which I have never been, she was just saying, you'll lose your job, and then where are you? So that if you continue to do your best work and white knuckle it until you have your own show, then you get to make those decisions. Now, I don't know where I stand on that opinion, but I'm just saying it's a really tricky thing as women in this business to answer that question. But I like Tina's answer.
But I mean, I think people of color too. This exact same thing as far as that with the show running and whether or not they'll say something. And I mean, and you have that in rooms at times. We've got guys in our room, and I mean, they're not trying. These are really sensitive guys. I will give that. But they can't help but to like talk over each other, and you struggle to get a word in. But I also just say, forget it. So-and-so, I want to hear what they got to say. I mean, I think you have the onus to speak up too. And yes, I don't know if I'm fortunate because I'm at a producer level to be able to say that. I'm not a staff writer, and I know that, but that's a fear that someone has to live with. That is horrible. And my thing is, I think that you have to say something, because the more that you become the mouse in the corner, the more you'll be treated that way. People treat you the way you let them treat you. And so if you don't want to be, I mean, it may be a harder road for you, but trust me, that was a female showrunner up there. Guess what? She can give another girl a job.
Yeah.
And also, I do think there are moments in your life where it's not, it would be satisfying on an emotional level to like get into an argument or get into a conflict and scream your head off potentially. And then there are times though where while it's satisfying on an emotional level, it's not on a professional level. But I have found that there is value in like walking away from a situation like, and even just with some kind of like stony death stare, trying to impart the reality of like, I remember you, I know your name, we have interacted. You may walk away from this experience not really recognizing how you've just handled it, but I have filed that away, and consider that a dangerous mark against you. I mean, so I just try to sort of remind myself.
Are you sure you want me in the corner or her? I mean,
Oh, that's a tough call.
I mean, what I'm trying to say is like, there does come a point at which it can be a very sort of sweet satisfaction to be able to say, oh yeah, I know that guy. No, I'm not even gonna interview him. No fucking way. It's a really exciting moment.
That's real, because part of people treating other people badly is the assumption that that person is never going to be successful, be in a position of power, right? And so that's the thing. I think if you have faith in yourself and you do the work, then eventually to understand that you will be in a position of power and to kind of hone that. Speaking of which, there's another question from Anonymous, who was a woman, or is a woman. I went to Wellesley, so I'm very like, go women. It's terrible. Anyway, what do you do when there is an emotional or industry wall that blocks you from achieving your goals? So one thing is kind of like, how do you deal with emotional blocks in your work? especially when you feel like they're starting to impact your work?
I think therapy is a good thing. No, I mean, for me, I mean, I kind of look at it the way I would handle any other situation in my life, any other arena. I rely on my family and my friends and my emotional network. So whether that be something happened to my family, a tragedy is that, or I'm having trouble on set, I kind of use that as a way for me to kind of heal and for me to have a moment of expression. But I never let it affect my work, because I'm like, this is why I'm here, do the work. And so it doesn't, I don't have the emotional room to let that come in and derail me creatively, to do that. Now, once I wrap, then yeah, I might have some emotions be coming out, and you do that, but you'll never see it on set. It ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. And it's not yelling or anything, but it's just, I think you just have to really have a good support system around you, even if they're a man and they're your husband, and and he's man even if.
Yeah.
So you got that you have to have people around you to support you, and it's the same thing in every other arena in your life.
I struggle with like brain rest as something that blocks my productivity. I think because in an effort to be hyper productive all the time, I actually shoot myself in the foot. And that's just something that I am still in process of trying to figure out how. And I think for everyone, artists or not, but I think artists are, feel that pain all the more deeply, is, that we're constantly on our phones and there's never a moment to really give yourself, at least for me, the time to incubate something new, and that is what is so important. And when do you allow yourself that moment to say, no, I'm turning off my phone for this whole day? I still haven't done that. So I don't know when that moment is, but I'll let you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of emotional blocks, that is one for me, where it's that sort of fatigue of chasing, just always chasing, always hustling. And when you stop the hustle in order to say, like, I'm gonna be okay, and when you do stop, then I think is when, obviously your best art can probably be born.
I think it's also the fear of saying no. I struggle with that, because I'm like, take it. You may never work again. Take it. But you just can't. I know you can't, and I'm still trying to learn that myself. I'm going through that, but because you won't get any rest. You won't have any reprieve. I mean, it's just impossible, and you also won't be doing work that you really believe in, because everything, like you said, everything coming through, by page 2, nah. That's not me. It doesn't speak to me. So I think that we have to always learn how to say no to certain projects, and to be able to be protective of not only our brand as filmmakers, but also our own personal lives and what we need to be healthy. Because if that's not healthy, trust me, you see a lot of showrunners who don't want to go home and keep a room open late at night because they hate their spouse. And the ones that don't, you have banker's hours, 10 to 6, and they can't wait to get home to their family and their kids. And that's why they do the hard work they do. So I think it's important to be healthy on both levels. Balancing out.
Madeline, is Madeline in the audience? Hey. Is that how you say it, Madeline? Madeline. That's a pretty name. What is the one thing you wish you would have known at the start of your journey as a filmmaker?
The importance of balance. This exact point, I mean, I think it took me a while to recognize that if I wore myself down with the work I was doing, that the product would suffer, and that it was reflecting that process. And so I had to learn to not make it everything, because it'll only be better.
For me, it's about having more than just one thing to show. because I made my first feature and I put so much into it. No, I didn't have a second script ready, but that's always what it is. What's next? And so for me, it's having a portfolio of things that you have in different arenas so you can have those things in the fire, because you don't know what's going to come through, what's going to fall apart, but to be able to diversify yourself in the sense of the work that you have and to make sure that you have enough to support yourself.
I would say that I've had now what feels kind of like a fairly long, I've been at this for close to 17 years or longer, and I'm really seeing, when I look back, there were some incredibly painful creative experiences for me, incredibly challenging, and they tested my sort of faith in myself, tested my faith in the mediums that I wanted to work in, and really at the darkest moments tested my faith in humanity, because I felt like I saw a lot of really odious behavior. And what I've really come out to kind of recognize is that isn't necessarily going to have to be a given in any of our lives or in my life, but it will be something I'll face, probably again, simply because this is a business built on making dreams come to life on a screen, whether it's a tiny screen or a huge screen, and a lot of people want ownership over that process to tell the story of our collective dreams. And so I recognize that there's going to be some really unpleasant potential minefields in front of me, and the only thing that keeps me going is that I actually have come to realize I enjoy the process. I really like working with people. I like sort of that speculative leap of faith that you have to take when you're making movies or making television and telling stories, where it's like you're just doing it because it's fun. And if it's ever not fun, if it's ever something that you're kind of like, this is simply a grind, I'd so much rather be fill in the blank. And for me, the longest time, it was like a pastry chef. And honestly, I mean, I know that if my head is going to, I'd rather be like mastering croissants right now, I've got to really look at this experience and ask myself, why am I doing this? What is this getting me toward? Because the process is everything. If you can't embrace that, if you really make it about sort of getting to the perfect result and getting success even, honestly, it's going to kill you, and it's going to kill your process and then kill your art. And so it really does have to be about doing the work itself with no sense of investment ultimately that it's going to give anything back to you.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that and just say I do think that, especially after making your first, feature in whatever capacity that is, I think then the sort of purity of the process becomes complicated by a sense of expectation, and I think that can be really paralyzing as an artist to think about, well, what do people want from me, rather than what do I want to give to people. And I think that is then the constant battle that you face, especially when you are working, in the intersection of art and commerce. I mean, process is everything, and I think you do get kind of caught up in like, but is that going to sell? Like, and then if it doesn't sell, like, what does that mean for me? And all of those questions. And I do think that it comes back to like, you have to just enjoy it, because I think the only way that the product is going to sing is if you love what you're doing when you're doing it.
Okay, so can we do like a fire round? What is that called? When I say it and you do it really like quickly? Okay, lightning round, yes.
We're pretty laid back people. I feel like we're going to be slow at this.
Slow lightning.
We're going to be like,
How have you managed balancing the hats between director, producer, writer, actor without letting the industry box you in only one of those holes?
Oh God!
Go, quickly,
I
Tina,
hate
go.
fire rounds. How do you do it? Oh, just do it. Because if you don't do it, then you'll get boxed in, I guess.
Done.
Is that fire? Okay.
You want to do it?
I try to take as many projects as possible so that one, you have no excuse to say no of why I can't direct something. So in every genre, I try to have my hand in it.
Oh, smart. What do you think each female performer can do to help create more opportunities for women of all ages, short of producing the work themselves?
Be good.
Be different, like embrace what's unique about you as a presence.
Yeah, I would say like kind of what I said earlier, but really imbue your character with some revolutionary spirit, even if it's banal. You know, you gotta do the work yourself and put your own fire in it.
And also, I would say, really don't be afraid to walk away from people pleasing, because I see it with a lot of actors because they spend so much time sort of being evaluated and being rejected, and it must just be so crushing. But from a director's standpoint, as soon as I feel like somebody's trying to please me, I can't see them anymore. And really, I encourage everyone, but particularly women, to let go of that quality because it just gets you nowhere.
Swagger.
So, and last kind of question, this is more of a kind of a someone who's on a soapbox in a card, which is awesome, saying, I'm over 50 and I'm tired of finding student films where I'm dying or have dementia. Is that how young people view us? That's fair enough. It's either that sweet little old lady, where are all the well-rounded older women? So what would you say to someone like that?
You're correct to be angry. And we need to see older people generally in storytelling, in popular entertainment. It's a crime that we don't see people at this time of their life. We could learn so much from them. It's really intense. That doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, ageism is definitely something that I think goes right along with everything else we've been talking about. And I think the thing is about having really good roles. And I mean, I kind of think about 6 Feet Under with James Cromwell and Frances Conroy. And it was like, people were like, oh, they have an intimate scene, they're having sex. I'm like, people still have sex later? I'm like, so I think it's about making sure that you realize life does not end at 50, so that you have characters that are going through things. So don't take the project if you're dying. Just don't take that, if that's what it's going to be. Find the roles that are there, or create the roles that you really want to see and to be able to have.
I would say create the roles, because I think ageism is like really tough in this industry, especially for women, obviously. And I think that to write your story and to see all the complexities of what a woman, you know, of an older age bracket looks like for real in reality, and how sexy she can be, and how unique and, you know, specific. Like, write it, make your own short, like, fuck a student film and go make your own, like, you know, and go and then put it on the internet, and maybe someone will see it and say, oh, this looks like a series, you know, like, let's go make this. But I do think that there is this kind of exciting democratization of media in this way, that people can throw something up on YouTube and be discovered, you know, and I think people are hungry for content, and there are so many kind of digital companies too, just on that scale, that you know, it could potentially have a huge audience. And I think that with movies like Marigold Hotel, and there are comps to prove that there is a hunger for these stories to be told.
Okay, last question. I want to kind of give us all an opportunity to call out other women that you feel like are really doing awesome work right now in the space. For me, each of your films have been like signs from the universe that I should continue to have faith in this kind of project of creating a world full of really different and unique and very human stories. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for all of your work and all the struggle and all just everything that you have put into it. Thank you. It's actually meant something so deep to me personally. But are there other people that are change makers, that are disruptors right now in the space that you'd like to kind of call out into the space, and so the audience can go and learn about them as well?
I mean, I think Jill Salloway is doing really cool stuff. Ava DuVernay, Shonda Rhimes. I mean, you look at, these are women who are not only putting content out that is telling stories from a different perspective, but they're also reflecting that in the way those stories are made and in who they're hiring. And so I think that those women are pretty important right now. That's TV more than film, although Ava does film.
I will shout out a friend's Seed and Spark campaign, Iram Bilal. She's making a film about American Muslims that I think really needs support on Seed and Spark right now. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and I think, those kind of platforms, digging through those kind of platforms to find those kind of necessary voices right now, especially, is a pastime.
Kind of name some of the people that I've already definitely look up to or really admire what they're doing in the industry. But I still have to give Gina Prince-Bythewood and Kimberly Pierce their dues. Gina's got shots fired on right now, and Kim actually opens up her house to females to make sure they have a creative space. And she's like, if you need to come write, here's a key. I mean, so my thing is they're mentoring. They're still mentors for me, as well as the impetus of why I even got into film. So for me, I really look to those two women, and I am extremely grateful for what they've done. And I'm hoping that, all of us can hopefully do the same thing for people out there.
I'll mention, I think the documentarian Laura Poitras is doing really interesting work, and she's sort of, in a way, kind of basically willing to trade her life in for an outlaw's life to do the work she does, and I just think that's pretty beautiful to see. And I also just want to say that I feel like so many young filmmakers come to LA, oftentimes having come from film schools and having been taught oftentimes by really influential female teachers who often just never get mentioned and are never considered the sort of mentors to, frankly, a lot of boys and men who learned from them. And the fact is, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 amazing female teachers who kept encouraging me and kept saying, if you don't find the reflection of what you want to be, then just be it. And it takes a lot of humility and a lot of strength to say, I'm going to teach somebody how to do that. And I just want to say to Catherine Matheson and Patricia Cooper and Carol Deisinger, those are people who actually taught me how to be a grown-up.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope you were as moved and inspired as I am. Thank you guys so much.